Come on. Trust me. What do you got to lose?
There are three ways to approach any game. That is, any structure, any set of rules and constraints. Now, whether that be a literal game, whether it be politics, the social arena, education, the career hamster wheel, etc., there are only three ways of approaching it. The first one is to accept the terms of the game and try to win it by following the rules, by adhering to the given norms, but doing so as efficiently as possible with one goal in mind: to come out on top. The second approach is to question the rules of the game. Why does the game look the way it does? Who sets the rules? Can the structure be changed? Can the rules be changed in a way that serves me and anybody else better than the current set of rules? And then the last approach, the third approach, is to question the game itself. The very existence of the structure that we're talking about, whatever that structure might look like. And again, it doesn't matter if we're talking about the video game that you are currently playing, your love relationship, your personal pursuit of self-realization, or the bread and circus gladiator fight zero-sum game that is modern society. Whether we question their very existence as games, whether we accept the games but try to alter the rules while playing them, or whether we just seek to win them at all costs without giving a damn about what needs to be done, our approach to these games that we find all around us determine the health of our bodies, of our minds, whether we are accepted by our surroundings, and whether we reach what our surroundings have been trying so hard to convince us constitutes success, or whether we reach some other type of success which we define and achieve for ourselves. This is what we're going to talk about today. How to approach the games that surround us, that suck us in. The games that everyone else seems to want us to play rather than choose the path that is our own life. All of these games that we don't even realize that we're a part of. In this age of technology, in the midst of an AI revolution, this topic seems to be more relevant than ever. Because though games have been all around us in some way or another for the entirety of human history, they've never been more captivating. How do we choose ourselves, our own values, when machines and algorithms seem to know what we want faster and better than we seem to do ourselves? How do we look through the veil and identify what is reality? That is, what is essential to us as individuals. In an age where our senses are increasingly being deceived, where we as a species seemingly bent on our own destruction, are building entities better and smarter than ourselves in every aspect, trained on the different facets of human language and the human mind. And what will be the consequences of accepting without questioning? Of effectively outsourcing reason, cognition, and our own pursuit of happiness to others, whether that be dictators or machines. A topic which I decided to do a video on because I recently watched Gore Verbinski's absolute masterpiece, Good Luck, Have Fun, Don't Die. A film which you have no doubt already watched, otherwise I recommend doing that right now before continuing this video. And a film which is exactly about how we as individuals approach the structures around us that seem sturdy and non-negotiable, that seem like they're making us happy, but in reality are nothing but illusions. Falsehoods placed there to fill out some gap in our consciousness. Something that was lost long ago, which we can't really identify and therefore have a hard time recreating. Now, I am not going to give a full recap of this movie. Again, if you want a recap, I suggest that you go watch it or watch it again. Personally, I watched the film 3 times in 3 days, and I personally believe it's worth the time. But in one sentence, a time traveler repeatedly returns to a Los Angeles diner to recruit the right combination of ordinary people to stop or alter the creation of an AI that will destroy humanity. The movie is effectively a tale combining dark satire, sci-fi, and time travel, And as these characters move through what seems to resemble the structure of a video game to a conspicuous degree, as this team of players, as it were, are gradually moving towards the final task, we're introduced to a bunch of interesting caricatures of the modern day individual and examples of how the world is falling apart. Through the stories of the disillusioned high school teachers Mark and Janet, we get a glimpse into the world of education, described in the movie as being in a state of war.
Are there rules in war, Mark? No.
Now, regardless of who is fighting this war and regardless of who started it, it is clear that both the teachers and the students are losing it. The teachers have no capacity for controlling the students and structuring a good learning environment, and the students, of course, learn nothing, but rather sit as mindless zombies, fixated on nothing but their phones and the brain-dead, ever-changing speed entertainment content found on social media. When Mark touches one of their phones, they react as one and collectively they attack the teachers. Now, this part of the story is all about the death of the human mind. It is without question a key aspect of modern-day society, which might also, I suspect, be the reason why this is the first of the flashbacks introduced in the film. Because what happens when we introduce an escape from reality to a mind that has not yet learned to deal with reality? To the mind of a teenager, a mind which is already so buried in existential confusion, identity crisis, sheer stimulation overload just from being alive. In other words, reality for the young mind is hard to deal with. It is something that we need to go through, something that we need to figure out. And those of us who survived those years know this. But to the mind itself, if given a way out too early, if there is no one there to grab you, to guide you, to tell you to strap in, to pull yourself together and learn to face reality, learn to live, then the mind will, not always, but often, be drawn away from the hard path and onto the easy path that is the escape. The one characterized by you being given everything that you think that you want without having to work for it. Entertainment, stimuli, so-called connection to other human beings. As our time traveler puts it,
My AI's gonna try to give you everything you ever wanted. Constant distraction, memorable characters, challenges and obstacles to overcome, exciting stakes that matter, and a satisfying ending. But in the end, it will all be a lie. And you live in a cage.
through the character of Susan, a mom whose son gets killed in a school shooting and who is offered a clone as a replacement, we are being presented with a beautiful but dark piece of satire on the anonymity of the modern-day individual and the indifference that arises out of that. How a society that forgets that society itself is made up from individuals naturally begins to treat those individuals as replaceable, as numbers, reminding us of the famous words by Joseph Stalin that while one death is a tragedy, a million deaths is a statistic. And now, of course, when even the one death ceases to be a tragedy, the process is close to complete. And this part of the story, of course, touches upon something which is fundamental to the rest of the story entirely: purposelessness. Two of the parents introduced, for instance, reveal a borderline sociopathic choice to give their cloned daughter odd characteristics just for the fun of it, because...
and isn't that the point? When you boil it all down?
Just have fun with it. That's what we say.
And this is an incredibly dark caricature of the consequences of purposelessness. Perhaps itself the consequence of a society that has left morality behind in pretty much anything but name. All ports are good in a storm, as they say, and with no moral anchor to hold the ship firm, who are we to blame modern-day individuals for turning to hedonism as a way to shield themselves from the sorrow that arises when one is alienated from one's own life? The story of Ingrid portrays similar points, but here we get a clear image of what the movie and this video is really about. That is the escape, as I mentioned a moment ago. Individuals choosing an alternative to reality.
I've made my choice. I'm choosing the other reality over this one.
Now let us consider why we might choose to do that. This world seems a cold one. Wars, famine, disease, crisis. More or less every time you turn on the news, you are confronted with a reality that is seemingly falling apart. And is it really to be considered irrational for a person to want to leave a building that seemed to them about to collapse? Well, no, it is in fact the case that it lies within us instinctually. That there might come a time where the current structures no longer seem worth living in, no longer seem worth fighting for. It is at these moments that people might be rounded up for a revolution. It is at these moments that people might choose to leave a relationship. But to make it even worse, the real problem to the individual of today. Because we might to some extent learn to manage all of these terrible news of poverty, war, and disease coming from the perspective of the Western industrialized citizen, let's be real, usually mostly from places far, far away. No, the real reason is to be found in the fact that so many people of today seem to regard their own individual lives as purposeless. As an effect, many people of today come to regard themselves as irrelevant, as useless.
Is it just so we can overcome obstacles and have, transformative experiences that allow us to grow and better ourselves?
Now we need to ask ourselves, how did we get stuck in this situation? Now here we should probably ask ourselves, what happens when we start running faster and faster? When we start pursuing change for the sake of change? When we start building and expanding for the sake of building and expanding? Because a sense of purpose arises when we pursue our own values. And for this to hold out long term, these values cannot contradict each other. If I am in the water drowning and trying to save myself by swimming towards the bottom, well, there is a logical end to that story, and it's not my survival and happiness. It works the same way with our minds. We work so hard to do and achieve what everyone else has told us to do and achieve from the moment we were born. What they've told us would make us happy. Only it doesn't. Rather, because we never slow down long enough to consider what matters to us, we never fully achieve it. And in fact remain for most of our lives in this strange state of limbo where our values are never fully pursued. Day after day, year after year, and the result is purposelessness, alienation, and all of the psychological and emotional consequences that arise out of that. Now, as with any other type of pain, as with any other type of problem, we face two options. We can either seek to fix the root of the problem, or we can dull the pain using cheap remedies and drugs. Cue social media, cue video games, cue pornography, cue alcohol, even coffee, but that's a point for another time. All of them created to monetize a human need to compare, to be entertained, to not feel reality, to essentially escape that life which we as individuals feel alienated from and find purpose somewhere else.
Why can't we already be our best selves?
Which takes us to the last character, in fact, the main character of the story. Or is he? As I said, our main character is a time traveler. One that has seen the future and reveals to the diner guests, that means to us, that
all of this goes horribly wrong.
He throws in a bunch of concrete examples.
It all started with morning phone time. At first, people would wake up, check their emails in bed, look at Facebook, scroll Twitter, XYZ, whatever, just a few minutes. No big deal. But morning phone time just got longer and longer. Let me ask you something. Where did all the bookstores go? Huh? Yeah. What did you do when the record stores started disappearing? Nothing. You did nothing.
Now, well, as I said, I won't go through every scene of that journey towards the end. But to make it short, it is revealed to us that the mission of the time traveler is to gather a group of individuals to find a boy in this time, the very individual who is building and right now only 1 hour away from turning on the machine, the AI, which is going to eventually destroy humanity. It is revealed that the result of this AI is that half of the population on Earth dies, while the rest walk around like zombies. immersed into the darkness of a virtual version of an opium slumber. As a fun fact, it is also mentioned at some point in the movie that the only industry that seems to end up benefiting from this is the medical industry, which is of course an economic impossibility, right? If nobody's working, where should the wealth, the purchasing power to buy medicine come from? But we'll leave that discussion of basic economics for another day. And the second thing to mention from the plot is that it is revealed to us by the time traveler that he as a child was isolated from technology by his own mother, who goes to live with him in the wilderness in order to essentially protect him, and as we shall see later, also herself, from technology. In a moment of rebellion, of temptation, he one day wanders outside their bunker and finds a pair of VA glasses. He puts them on, takes them off again, or does he? Is found by the machines, who proceed to murder his mother. The continuation of this, as told by himself,
When she died, I blamed myself. But I was also free. Free to choose my own battles.
Now what is this all about? Now there are more interpretations of this movie than there are YouTubers and viewers. But there is one interpretation, strongly supported by details left and right throughout the story, which is also closely linked to the topic of this video. And that is the fact that our time traveler himself is a player in his own game. That yes, he puts on the VA glasses as a child and in fact never take them off. That him continuously going back in time in order to select a new combination of the right individuals in order to save the future. Having to pass a number of challenges in order to ultimately stop or alter the sequence of events that led to the death of his own mother is all a game, a structure, a set of rules constructed for the sake of one thing, giving the player the reason he needs to choose to continue, to choose that alternative to reality over reality itself, or to never question the structure at all. The theme of all of this is purposelessness. Was his mother, whom it is also revealed to us is identical to the character of Ingrid, actually allergic to technology? We have no idea, and it's not the point. It might simply be the projection that his mind creates, a manifestation within the virtual reality of what the mind of a child would understand from his mother's fears or concerns about AI and technology. Has he traveled 117 times to that diner? He might. Just as a player of any video game might have spawned hundreds of times back to the same level to try to complete it over and over again. One that knows all of the different characters that he can and needs to choose in and out, all for one reason, because of the human search for purpose. Throughout the story, the time traveler keeps receiving the same image, flashback, vision. Him drawing the sun, based on how his mother describes it to him as a child.
I just wanted to see a sunrise.
My mother described them to me in detail, and I would draw her words.
Based on this interpretation of the story, this is a glimpse of reality. Something he brings with him into the virtual reality, the one that he never leaves after that first time where he puts on the VA glasses. And it is this glimpse of something which essentially represents a search for meaning. And in his case, a search for reality which becomes his purpose. And the AI builds a story, a struggle, a game around this quest, around this purpose. And even our main character, whom we might suspect at some level knows that what he sees is not reality, chooses the game. He chooses to accept the structures in which he lives, to the extent that even when he allegedly finishes his mission and is ready to die, he refuses to. He looks at the sun, then suddenly remembers the image of the son he drew from his mother's description, and something in him realizes that the drawing of the son is more real than the son that he is currently observing.
Something's wrong. Hey, stay with me. Stay with me.
I'm sorry, Princess.
What?
You will save the world.
What are you doing?
Just not this one.
What?
Now, it might seem obvious at first how he does this, but really, it isn't. He has no obvious reason to deem what he sees unrealistic in that moment. Remember, we are to believe that this man has never seen the sun rise. And looking at the sun in that scene, it looks perfectly right. And how, at least, would you be able to determine anything by comparing your recollection of your own drawing of the sun to a sun that you are right now observing for the first time in your life? The answer is, you wouldn't be able to do that. Because the foundational answer here is that the purpose of this character is to travel back in time again and again in order to try to save his mother. Essentially processing the guilt that he has been feeling for his entire life, processing those of his mother's technology concerns that were projected onto him as a child, by essentially dedicating himself to a life, to a game that consists of fighting AI and the machines and saving the life of his mother. Deep inside, he knows that whatever he does, whatever the consequences of his actions, they are meaningless because he is essentially playing a game. And that reality which he pursues disappeared long ago, and he cannot ever truly regain it within the structures of the game. We can even stretch it as far as saying that his mother might not have died in reality. But he himself is no longer part of that reality, and some part of him simply will not let this go. And therefore, no matter how many times he returns, no matter how many times he succeeds even, we can question whether he should ever be able to accept the result. Because any result, any end, would mean the dissolving of the purpose which has been his life. It might mean his death, something which cannot be reconciled with living within a simulation, obviously. And as such, even for the man in our story, who allegedly tries to save humanity by breaking the structures, because he allegedly travels back in time to change what has happened, even that character is essentially not breaking any structures. He is simply following the rules that are being presented to him. Because deep down, he chooses to do so. And why does he choose to do so? Well, he tells us himself.
Constant distraction, memorable characters, challenges and obstacles to overcome, exciting stakes that matter, and a satisfying ending.
But he also himself gives us the bitter conclusion to what he himself has chosen and will always choose.
But in the end, it will all be a lie. And you live in a cage.
Unless, and that is what takes us back to the three approaches we can take to any game. Unless we choose the last of the three approaches. That is to question the existence of the game itself. To question the very basis for escaping reality. Which in so many ways means questioning much of what makes up society today. Also alluded in Ingrid's dialogue with the AI.
You're not a god. You're not inevitable. You're just us.
And this requires us to first be able to answer the question, why does living in reality, and even seemingly crappy reality, hold any meaning? And to answer that question, we need to be able to identify what is meaning, what is value to us as individuals, and why does connecting with reality matter in the pursuit of these things. Now, there is one line in the movie presented to us by the main character in the beginning of the story that seemed to capture the dangers to the modern day individual more than almost anything in the rest of the movie.
Progress is only progress that makes things better.
Progress is only progress if it makes things better. Building just for the sake of building. Expanding just for the sake of expanding, that is, changing just for the sake of changing, is not the same as progress. And it represents a life, a mindset, not very different from that of the hamster running inside its wheel. The wheel being the game, the structure, whose rules the hamster blindly follows. Progress for us as individuals doesn't just mean more available, cheaper goods. It can mean that, to some extent. Being able to buy clothes of better quality for our children, more healthy food, more leisure. All of these things are connected to our levels of wealth and therefore, to some extent, producing, expanding, and innovating is not completely disconnected from our value pursuit. But, as with anything else, there is a trade-off. Everything comes at a price. And the question that we as individuals, as consumers, need to ask ourselves is, when does change and innovation begin to undermine our pursuit of our own values? When does running faster and faster to produce more and more cease to hold meaning? Because it essentially happens for no other reason than for us to increase our ability to consume things we don't need, that are not essential to us because they hold no real connection to our actual values. In other words, we might need to reconsider our approach to the game or the games that make up so much of the life of so many of us. The game of society, the game of consumerism, the game of eternal expansion and competition over resources and status. In a reality where the most valuable of resources is one which cannot be traded, cannot be recreated, cannot be recycled, which in its essence cannot really truly be stolen, namely time itself. There are 3 approaches to any game. Accept the rules, the boundaries, the terms, and seek to win at all cost, even if that cost is your own happiness. Question the rules, try to change the rules, but still accept the game. Or question the existence of the game itself. Stand still, get off the roller coaster, watch the structures from the outside and leave those structures behind which never served us in our pursuit of meaning to begin with. That is the question, that is the path, that is the choice that the modern day individual faces. And I would pose the question, whether this in fact is not the greatest and most foundational crisis facing mankind of the 21st century. Not the rise of AI itself, but the inability, the unwillingness to question the foundation of the hamster wheel, of the structures that have been sold to us in return for our happiness. Structures that will be sold to us over and over again, in new wrapping, from the catharsis of the Colosseum to the dopamine release of AI virtual reality. Thank you for watching. Please leave comments below giving me your own opinion and questions, suggestions for other videos, etc. If you wish to further follow my discussions on proto-morality, essentialism, slow living, and philosophy in general, feel very free to subscribe. And otherwise, good luck, have fun, don't die.